Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Oh, yep. Live around the world on the internet at MichaelDukesShow.com and across the state of Alaska on this your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Hello, good morning, my friends. Welcome to the program. It is the Michael Dukes Show. It is the Thursday edition of the show as we're racing headlong into Firearms Friday, which is tomorrow. Joining us on the program tomorrow will be Dr. John Lott from the Crime Prevention Research Center, also the author of the book More Guns, Less Crime, et cetera, et cetera. We're going to be talking with him about some of the headlines from around the state, from around the country, and some of the opinion pieces that he's been putting up as well. That's going to be coming up tomorrow on the program, along with Willie Waffle and more. Should be a fun show. Today on the program, hour two is going to be busy. We've got a lot of stuff. We're getting down to the wire on that Saturday deadline for the races around the state, and things are heating up. There's been a whole lot of movement in the last 24 hours, and we'll be giving you the full rundown on that and what it could potentially mean as well. And then it's going to be busy. It's going to be busy. But coming up here in hour one, we're going to be talking here in just a hot second with Representative Will Stapp, who is the state rep for District 32 up in the interior. We'll get a recap and a report on what's going on in the legislature, what happened in the final days of session. We're going to talk with him about state's fiscal outlook and the fiscal plan, the fate of the PFD, and everything else. It's going to be a good show. I hope you're ready. It's crisp and clear. Oh man, it was a little cool this morning, but the skies are blue, and it's going to be a beautiful day. And I hope you are ready for the kickoff of summer. Is this officially it? Is this the kickoff of summer? I'm speaking it into if we could keep snow from falling till after Halloween, we definitely could get the summer kick-started right now, couldn't we? So hopefully we're all going to be moving in that direction. That's the plan. That's the plan there. So we appreciate that. All right. Anything before I can't think of anything before we go to AlaskaRadioAuction.com and take a look at what's left over there. There's still some great stuff there. If you haven't been over there lately, we're going to be closing the site down here, I think this next week. But if you're looking for restaurant certificates or hotel stays or I don't know, fishing trips, canoe rides, Phillips cruises, there's all kinds of stuff over there. Go check it out. Go check it out right now at AlaskaRadioAuction.com and get that all squared away. That was what I was thinking about there. All right. Well, let's do it to it, shall we? Shall we jump over and get things rolling, ready to go with Will Stapp, who is, of course, state representative for District 32 up in the interior. And he's going to come on board, and let's talk with him right now about what happened down in the legislative session, the good, the bad, the highs, the lows, the ins and outs, and everything else. We'll start off right now. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing good, Michael. How are you?
It's a beautiful day in paradise, man. There's no snow on the ground. I feel good about that. I know somebody said, you've mentioned snow twice. Well, I'm sorry. It's the highlight of my day when I can look outside and see that it's sunny and bright, and it's summertime. I'm feeling good. How about yourself?
Oh, good. I did want to remind you that you are missing real summer in Alaska up here in the interior, where it's actually warm and sunny. Today it's a little overcast and it rained last night, but it was a nice 70 degrees yesterday and beautiful skies. So,
Well, that's
all,
it's not too bad. I'm happy for you. It was beautiful here yesterday. It was 60 something degrees. Also, it's not 50 below here in the middle of winter, so I'm feeling pretty good about that as well. So there's trade-offs in all things. I don't get the 80-degree weather in the
yeah,
summer, but I don't get the 50 to below zero in winter either.
yeah, we always try to leave that negative 50 thing out of the conversation
Yeah.
when we talk about how beautiful our summers are. So.
Yeah, you always dodge that question. And the fact that the utilities are 3 times as much as what I pay down here, and I mean, there's a whole, there's pros and cons to all that stuff. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
I love Fairbanks, but I'm still satisfied with my situation down here. So it's all good. All right. Well, let's get. We haven't had a chance to talk in quite a while, so let's dig in here and go over a little bit of what happened in the last days of session, and
Sure.
take a look at what happened there. Talk about the state of the budget. The possibility of a fiscal plan, the fate of the PFD, et cetera, et cetera. Let's get started. So for you, highs and lows of this last session, as you look at it, you see things going on. What were some of the highs and lows for you watching the whole process unfold there in Juneau?
Oh man, yeah, there's certainly a lot. I guess I'll probably I've tried to always be a positive person, Michael. So I'll probably start with actually some of the things that we did. I think that are going to be good long term. You mentioned utilities and stuff like that in the interior. Well, we passed a kind of a comprehensive transmission bill, as governor's bill, it's called House Bill 307. Had a lot of different aspects in that bill, but one of the things that the bill did was it finally looked to force the utilities to eliminate the wheeling and pancake tariff charges that they put on, the selling of power that goes up and down that intertie, right? And as a former kind of interior guy, you're going to know that, in GVA owns a big chunk of this place, the hydro dam in the Kenai called Bradley Lake. And when we buy power from that Bradley Lake, we are charged wheeling and pancake tariff rates on the purchasing of our own power. And when you combine that for line loss, we end up paying, a bunch of additional fees from other utilities to get that power sent to the interior. I mean, Bradley Lake's our cheapest source of power, even on top of that. So just getting a combined RTO, Rail Belt Transmission Organization, laying the framework through that, through the RCA, I think is actually a really good long-term step in looking at how we're going to generate the cheapest amount of power on the rail belt, no matter the source, so we can send the cheapest electron up and down the rail belt free of any, any artificial charges to users. So ultimately, if we can bring on, let's say, new coal generation, or maybe even other types of renewable generation, so long as it's cheaper than what we're doing now, ratepayers can actually pay less on the rail belt than they are currently, especially in the interior. So that's a good thing, I guess. I'll start off with that.
No, I mean, I think that's anything that can reduce the ratepayers' costs and still maintain everything is a good idea. I know they've been talking about they're trying to shut down the Healy plant and some other things for coal. Anything that the Interior delegation or to the legislature is looking at to try and help keep things rolling in that direction outside of the transmission line situation, because again, I know that everybody wants to go to renewables, but nobody wants to talk about the interim between now and when renewables would potentially come online in the long run.
Yeah, no, that's definitely hitting the nail on the head, Michael. So the GVA reversed their decision on Healy 2, and we're actually selling power from that plant now, and the other coal plant in Healy 2, South Central, or we leased it last winter when they had their cold snap. But anything that we do, I mean, just to kind of give folks perspective on the federal level. I mean, at the federal level, the Biden administration has basically said, within the next several years, every coal plant is going to have to be sequester the carbon. Otherwise, they're going to have to shut down even existing ones, right? So, and I can't remember the target date on that, but it might be as far out as 2030, which seems like a long way away, but it's not really that long. So, that's a little scary, right? Because coal is our cheapest source of power. We have a 400-year known coal supply, and think Healy alone. Of course, that'll increase exponentially if they do more, exploration for that type of resource. But yeah, I mean, look, there's kind of no getting around it other than like proven hydro reserves for renewables. Wind and solar not base load power. So you need some source of generally fossil fuel burning power that serves as your base load. And ideally, you want that as cheap as possible. And there's really nothing as cheap as coal that we have in terms of that. So
Right. What do you say to folks who say that the RTO is basically redistributing the cost, that it'll be cheaper for folks in Fairbanks, but that cost will then be spread to other people, and that there's folks, I know the folks down in Homer are pretty upset about what's going on with HEA and some of the things that are happening there. What's your commentary on that?
Yeah, so that's definitely a good argument. So I would say in the long term, I think that you will see a reduction in costs. Obviously, as an interior guy, we'll see a rate reduction probably as soon as it's implemented, because we're basically on the receiving end of all the tariff charges. But just because that scenario exists today doesn't mean that'll be the scenario in the future, right? Especially with this kind of looming shortage of gas in Cook Inlet, right? So there may be a situation in the near future where we're actually selling a lot more power to Cook Inlet folks than we have been in the past. But I certainly sympathize with Homer. They're a very small, let's say, like utility compared to GVA or Chugach or even MEA in terms of user base, and they have a lot of different power sources. Of course, that's where the bulk of, that's where Bradley Lake Hydro is. But to me, this is about the long-term investment of how are you going to deploy the most efficient source of power generation on the rail belt. And if you can remove kind of these artificial barriers of fiefdoms, you're going to get a lot better results, in my opinion. So kind of the example I would give is like wind power, right? So you were around when GVA went and built Eva Creek, if I remember right. I think you were on assembly back then.
Well, yeah, I was there, and they denied Mike Kraft his ability to hook into the system with something that he'd already built as well.
Yeah, with the IPP. So, so the part of the bill did address that issue with, it's called independent power producers, right? And their ability to sell and actually be exempted from property taxes, just like power generation at the co-ops are exempted from property taxes. But, my argument's always been, like, if you actually had a unified rail belt utility, I don't think we would have ever built Eva Creek where it is. I think if folks wanted to build windmills, they would have probably deployed them in, honestly, a place that has better wind and that's not as cold, right? So, I always think of Palmer when I think of wind, or the Matsu Valley, because the wind's always blowing down there. But this is the type of kind of investment that you end up getting when you have these, let's call it disjointed kind of fiefdoms that are all kind of not on the same page in terms of long-term plan of power generation. So again, my hope is that, we made a pretty big step in turning that around. And I think there's a lot of good criticisms of the bill and the RTO and stuff like that. I think most of those are fair. I will say that, from my perspective, we just can't keep doing what we've been doing, Michael, because what we've been doing isn't working. And I think everybody knows that when they get their electric bill in the mail. We especially know that in Fairbanks. I tell folks, when I was down in Juneau, my GVA bill for January was like $440, right? I wasn't even in my house, and I just don't know a lot of people that can be able to shell out $400+ a month for an electric bill when they're not even really using their electricity.
Right. So,
well,
it was always one of the highlights here in the first 8 months of living down in the South Central area. I saved about $5,000 in utilities alone. That was a cost, for me to begin with. So I'm definitely on with that. Will Stapp is our guest, State Representative District 32. We're talking about the session. He was just highlighting one of the good things he said in that. We're up against the break, though, so we're going to continue here in just a moment. The Michael Duke Show continues. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We'll return with Will Stapp in just a moment. Back with more right after this.
If you missed the show, you can listen to it on your time with Dukes On Demand. Oh, and it's free. Like America used to be. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay, we're in the break right now. Will Stapp is our guest. We're continuing on here. Will, explain to me how you think that the economy of scale is. I mean, is that how you're saying that in the long run this is going to be cheaper for everybody? Because the problem is that we end up with basically, even though you're creating an overarching bureaucracy, it's still basically quasi-monopolies in each one of these communities, and they're set by RCA and the ratepayers. So, I mean, people especially down in South Central or in the South Peninsula are definitely feeling the pinch on this. They've seen these increases. And so, I mean, how do you see this eventually equalizing where everybody pays less? I mean, explain that to me in small words, because I'm just a high school graduate.
Well, no, I mean, it's a really complicated topic. And again, like I think the let's call it the concerns of the folks down in the Kenai are pretty valid. Basically because of the position that they've been in for a long time. So there's two things going on at play here. One is the regulatory framework through the RCA. I'm not a big fan of that. I think that, let's call it regulatory intervention on behalf of the state agency has kind of really ultimately kind of put the state and folks in South Central in this kind of gas crunch that they're in, right? I mean, to me, when I go back to all the meetings we had on Cook Inlet gas and power and stuff like that on House Finance, I constantly asked the question when we were talking about different backdoor subsidies that we could give to incentivize development. I would always kind of ask the question of what's the material difference from just uncapping the price cap that you have on the sale of gas to the utilities in South Central, allowing the market demand to take over and the rate to rise in that way, rather than trying to continually artificially subsidize development in the inlet. Because we did that, again, about, 12 years ago or something like that. We dumped millions, if not $1 billion in subsidies and development of gas in Cook Inlet. A lot of folks have been able to reap the benefit of that. But I think when you run the long-term cost benefit analysis, what it probably ended up doing is it had a lot of folks kind of take their eye off the ball and really the need for domestically produced gas for a long-term supply. So rather than looking at, ways that we could better facilitate even an in-state pipeline for our kind of unlimited supply of North Slope gas, people were satisfied with these kind of temporary measures in Cook Inlet. And now it's pretty clear that the inlet itself has a lot of challenges for future development. So irrespective of what happens, Michael, not to sound long-winded, unfortunately, folks in South Central, their electric bills are going to go up just because, the generation right now is almost all gas generation, and it doesn't appear that they're going to have the gas without imports, right?
Right.
And,
well, but why?
Was,
I guess my question to that is, why are imports a bad thing? I mean, it would be nice to have Alaskan gas. I mean, since we're sitting on a gazillion cubic feet of it, it sure would be nice. But if it's not economically viable, you were talking about letting the free market decide. I mean, then why shouldn't we be, at least in the short term, gearing up for the importation if that's going to be the short term fix? Why should we avoid that like it's some kind of bad news? If that's going to be the cheapest in the short term.
Yeah. So, good. It's a good point. So there's just a couple things to consider, right? So, for one, importing natural gas, I think when you invest in an import facility for LNG, for example, whether that's on the Cook Inlet or if that's at Point McKenzie, et cetera, to me, you talk about kind of basic economic principles. So once you start importing LNG, the most efficient way to do that is to ink long-term contracts rather than have to pay spot price, right? And as soon as you have imports of LNG, you basically are now in direct competition with your domestic gas production, right? So, in theory, and probably will be a reality, you'll end up creating what's called demand destruction in your own market. So you'll make
hold on a second.
Production.
Hold on a second, Will. I'm sorry. I'm up against. We're coming back on, and we'll finish. We'll allow you to finish your thought on this.
No worries.
I'll restate the question here, and we'll get started again. But because I think this is an important point, and I want to bring it back up. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Here we go.
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Huh. Whew. I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
All right, we're continuing on this beautiful Thursday morning. Representative Will Stapp, state rep for District 32 up in the interior, joins us. We've been talking about the highs and lows of the legislative session, and we were just talking about the energy issues, the transmission line, and Representative Stapp talked about the free markets and how these will help in the lowering eventually of costs. And my question was, of course, if we're going to let the free market work, then why aren't we addressing the idea of why are we continuing to try and avoid this whole idea that importation is an answer, even if it's just in the short term? Because nobody seems to be asking the question of whether it's royalty relief or direct payments to the producers or whatever it is. Who pays? We all pay for it. Maybe not the ratepayers, but the state will and the people will through PFD cuts and everything else. And so my question is, if it's a free market question, Will, then why not look at, even if it's just a short-term solution, the importation of gas? We've got a facility on the Cook Inlet down on the peninsula. It's already ready to go. It's got some FERC certification. It would have to get some other ones, but it's pretty much ready to go. Why won't we look at that? And you were giving us your answer as to why you think the importation is a bad deal.
Yeah, no. So I'm really glad you brought it up because it is really a critical question. And I tell folks a couple of things. So number one, I would say that it's not inherently a bad thing. If you're just doing natural price comparison, like at the moment of development, right? So my fear with building an import facility and having the utilities basically sign long-term contracts for imports, that's a more efficient thing to do than having them just buy spot market price for gas. But once you start inking long-term contracts for gas imports, you basically kind of get pigeonholed in direction. So during the break, I was talking about when you import the natural gas, liquefied natural gas, you're basically creating demand destruction in your own domestically produced market. So now domestically produced gas is now going to be more expensive because the market demand is going to be less because you're competing with direct imports, right? So in theory, right, if that's cheaper than domestically produced gas over the long term, that's not inherently a bad thing because you do want to have the lowest cost to not only, domestic ratepayers, but I just don't think that, when it comes to looking at, let's say, an in-state gas line or something like that, amortizing that over the long term and looking at capital costs, what is the actual goal going to be? So to me, the goal should be to try to dramatically reduce the cost of heat and power to Alaskan residents. And the reason I think that's so important is, unless you do that, I don't see any way that our economy ever gets diversified, mainly because the cost of doing business in Alaska due to heat and power, especially on the commercial industrial side, is so astronomical,
right,
that we just end up exporting a lot of raw materials rather than any value added.
Well, the problem,
and kind of the model for that. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say the problem with that idea is that all the economics of any in-state line or any mass-built line, the economics have never worked out. I mean, that's the problem. Going back to the idea of the free market is, it would be great to have I'm in support of a gas line. The problem is that the billions of dollars it's going to cost can't be. First of all, no private company wants to touch it. And so now you're asking, not you, but people have been asking for the state to build it, but then we all pay anyway. And now it's more of a hidden cost than a direct cost. And it's great. It would be
Yeah.
great to have Alaskan gas. I'm not against that. I think that's a good idea, but only if it's economically feasible. And the economics on every presentation that's been made for every different permutation of a line just doesn't work out. So that's the question. If it is a free market question, yes, it may put us in a direction that in the long term slows the production of Alaskan gas in the long run. But the gas will still be there. We just need to be able to, we need to be able to live in the meanwhile. And that's the whole point of this free market discussion.
Yeah. So to kind of finish off that point, Michael, so basically what you should do, and we haven't done this yet, but we should look at a direct analysis, let's say a 30-year projection on the actual costs of that line. Because you're right, if we were to build a line, an in-state line, the state would basically have to pony up the capital. The same is really true of the big export line, to Asia. Investors are not really, I shouldn't say not interested, but, the reason that project hasn't happened is because the economics of that aren't there. Otherwise, you would have seen that investment, especially when you take into account all the kind of globalized massive investments in LNG exports across the world, and especially in the United States and Canada and Mexico, et cetera, So now what you should do is you should just compare the long-term cost analysis of, hey, what is the cost of imported LNG to the consumers of Alaska, because they're going to pay that, right? Versus what is the cost of domestically produced gas on an in-state line from the slope, and how you distribute that to residents. Who pays? And the answer to who pays, it's basically the same person, right? So you're either paying it out of the state coffers indirectly, or you're paying it directly at the consumer level, right? So that's kind of the material difference in terms of the cost, if that makes sense, right? And then you just determine like what that number is, what the actual cost to the consumer is. Is it less now, or is it more now? And what do you think the long-term implications on increasing costs for, if the state were to import gases? So, what's that look like effect on development and consumption, and especially commercial and industrial development?
Yeah,
right? That's kind of what needs to happen.
Well,
but again, like the biggest fear I have. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead. Finish up your thought quickly here.
Yeah, no, just the biggest fear I have on kind of going down the road of LNG imports is I don't think you get off that path. If you go down that path, I don't think you get off that path, because I think once you get long-term contracts for LNG imports, I think it becomes incredibly difficult to look at the economics of like a different in-state option, because utilities will be in long-term contracts, right? So.
Well, and again,
that's kind of a straight proposition.
Yeah, no, I'm a fan of the free market, and if we can do something, even if it slows down production of Alaskan, the thing is, it's not a free market thing if you subsidize it. If you subsidize it, you've already bastardized the market to begin with, so that's a problem there. Let's move on to some bigger things. Overall, the talk about the fiscal plan for the state. We really don't seem to have a fiscal plan. Will, we had a larger budget this year than last year. It's just like this continuing issue. I know Ben Carpenter has worked hard on getting some fiscal moves in to try and put some things in that the fiscal policy working group put together. But we had a budget that just continues to grow. And I know you made some arguments against some of the cuts that Carpenter made on the floor and some of the other things. What's your plan? What's the overall fiscal plan to try and keep the state from basically consuming everything at this point? The PFD is going to be gone in 3 years. And I know you're not a huge fan of the PFD as it sits right now, but eventually that money will be gone. And then they'll be looking to us with their hand out, basically saying it's time for you to pay your fair share. So what's your fiscal plan for the coming 10-year period?
For starters, it starts with spending less money. So I don't know if I think I supported the majority of, Carpenter's cuts. The majority of the things that he looked to cut, I think, and it wasn't just him, but were really the kind of vacancies and positions that we talked about before, and we kind of went over that last time. So the first thing I would say is you have to kind of look at control mechanisms on the growth of the state's budget, right? And a lot of that's going to come down to the people who get elected, right? So unfortunately, we have a divided legislature, and there are a lot of people in Juneau who think that the state government is basically starving in terms of the money we spend on programs, and we need to spend dramatically more money on programs. I think the best example I can do that is, the difference between the Department of Health budget in the House and the Department of Health budget in the Senate. So like I said, I chaired the health department budgets, and we passed over a budget that had about a 2% reduction in it, and it turned into a 4% increase in the Senate side, right? So and most of those cuts, didn't materialize, through after the conference committee process. We were disadvantaged in the conference committee process due to the nature of how the body politic works. But I will say that last time I was on the show, Michael, I talked about my bill to cut the program no one's on, and didn't even get that passed. So I think the easiest place to start is maybe we should cut programs that no one's actually on, and then we can maybe start saving money. The second aspect of that is in terms of the PFD. I don't think that anyone really. There's certainly probably some people want to see the PFD go away. I don't want to see the PFD go away. I think it's an integral part of Alaska's life. But the way you do that is you are very mindful of revenues at the state, and I don't know if I would agree that the PFD would be going away in 3 years. It really depends on the oil price and production volume. But I will say it is a legitimate concern, because, if your price production fall to levels that even in recent memory, the state will not be able to balance its budget, even at a relatively healthy oil price, without eliminating the dividend program. And we're talking oil price in the 60s at that, right? So clearly something has to give. I think that, my short experience in politics has been, in order to get there, you need the pressure. People don't want to do kind of a lot of forward-thinking things, and maybe that's the nature of 2-year election cycles or 4-year election cycles. But it is what it is. So I would say, the first step is really look for people who are willing to reduce the size and scope of government by looking at what government does and deciding to do less, and go from there. That's really the first step.
The oil price and oil production volume, the volume and the value, that shouldn't affect. The PFD is based on a POM is based on the royalty draw from the POMV. So it has the price and production volume have a long-term impact on it over a 5-year rolling average. But the bottom line is that Alaskans are supposed to be getting a half of that as it is right now, but the government's been consuming all of it. So really, this is not a function of revenue or of oil prices or anything else. This is a function of spending. Now, you had a spending cap that you guys fought to get out of committee and everything else, and it was looking like it was going to be one piece of this fiscal plan. But in the long run, you amended it to include stuff over the cap, and it became almost ineffective in part at the end, because it was not what the Fiscal Policy Working Group had talked about, holding that spending down under the cap. We still don't have is this a revenue problem or a spending problem, Will?
Well, so for start, let me kind of address the spending cap. So what we did to be able to get the bill out of the committee and finance basically is we had to put incorporate the permanent fund dividend payments under the cap, right? So we incorporated the statutory PFD under the cap, which, of course, in order to do that, you had to raise the cap, right? So is that ideal? Probably not. Like, the ideal solution, Michael, would be to take the dividend really out of the equation entirely, to be able to remove that from the legislative appropriation authority. But the votes just aren't there to do that, right? That's pretty clear that most people, when you talk to them, at least in elected office, that they argued that it should be all appropriations should be under the state spending cap, But I would say, the state clearly has a spending problem. Like I've said before, I don't think you can reduce the state operating budget by $800 million or $1 billion, especially in a single fiscal year. But you can certainly take nice chunks out of it, and that's what you should be looking to do. And the way you do that is you just do an analysis of all the programs that the state does. You break it down in three different categories. What's constitutionally obligated, what's statutorily obligated, and what the state actually just spends money on. And then you just ask yourself a question of like, okay, there are these programs that we spend money on. Is this the most efficient use of the resources that the state has? Yes or no? And I think you're going to find a lot of times that there are a lot of programs that the state administers that are, sound good on paper. I mean, who doesn't want to help people? But when you look at the results, you're going to find programs, where the state spends thousands of dollars or tens of thousands of dollars a month, giving someone $70 for utility payment, and then you say, okay, well, how is it an efficient thing to spend $10,000 or $20,000 a month on giving someone $70 for a utility payment? Right? There's got to be a better way to do that. And should we be doing that? And if we should be doing that, then how do we make sure it doesn't cost an astronomical amount of money?
Will Stapp is our guest, State Representative, District 32. We got one final segment coming up in this hour. We'll give Will a little bit of free reign to talk about some of the things that he thinks are important. We'll continue with more here in just a minute. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio.
Our light, our guide, and our trusted friend. Michael Duke Show.
All right, we're in the break with Will Stapp right now, continuing on with this discussion. I guess my question is, Will, I mean, if we find, we're looking for ways to save money, and yet there's the argument. I mean, you mentioned it earlier, the vacant positions. I mean, there were, between some of the things that Shower was trying to do, trying to pull back some of the lapsed funds from positions that were still not filled. This was money that was just sitting in there, hadn't been used, to some of the newer ones with where there was hundreds of positions that hadn't been filled. To me, that would be an easy way to pull some of that money back. And if they needed it for future use, they come back again and they asked for it to be appropriated again. Why the reticence to eliminate that? That seems to be a simple fix. In the short term, why such a reticence to address that at this point?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I would say, my honest answer is I think people would view it as disruptive. I don't view it as disruptive. I think that when you understand what happens with vacant positions, right, i.e. the money allocated, if it's unspent, can be used on personnel services. If not, it lapses. And then it goes to these capitalized waterfall accounts like the state's, risk account. And then it lapses to the CBR, unless it's, say, the health department or family and community services. They have unique kind of internal spending authorities. But it should be done, right? And there's lots of reasons why it should be done. And the most important reason, I think, is transparency alone, just not only to voters, but even people and elected officials, Michael. Like I kind of talked about this last time with overtime hours in the state's Department of Corrections budget, right? So the only way, folks generally will know what the overtime spend for state employees is if the department comes and asks for a supplemental for it, right? Because what they do is they use the lapsed personnel positions to cover those costs. And in order to get a handle on those costs, you got to be able to look at them, right? So the Department of Corrections, for example, came and asked for, it was like $11 million or something on overtime hours. But that was after they spent all of their payroll savings from the amount of vacancies they had, right? So their overall spend was considerably higher than that on overtime spend. And then now that, if you don't know that, you don't understand where the problem is, right? So, the problem in that department, in my opinion, is going to be the way that collective bargaining agreement is structured, where, the most senior people basically get double time hours for overtime, right? Which is an incredibly expensive way of doing business. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's exactly it. I mean, they have become so used to being able to give all their people as much overtime as they want because they have those slush funds. They're not forced to run the departments efficiently or with sustainability. They're using it more as a benefit package than as anything else. That's what those monies are being used for. And any argument against that seems to be counterintuitive, to say the least. Brian asks a very good question in the chat room right now, which I would agree with. And I would say, this goes back to the kind of starve the beast model, where he says, how about you take the state out of the loop for all those programs you were just talking about, the non-mandated programs, fully fund the PFD to let the people need to figure out how to spend their money, cut out the middleman and pass the savings along to the little guy. Why don't we do that? Why instead they always look to the PFD as that basket of money that they can draw from to build all their pet programs on. As long as the money's there, they're going to spend it, Will. That's the problem. You have to starve the beast.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of my argument against imposing new taxes, right? Because I think that if you impose new taxes, you will effectively just have the same result with more money for government, right?
But why isn't that your argument for the
will,
PFD? Then, I mean, again, why isn't that?
Yeah, well,
why shouldn't the people receive their full 50% of the PFD and then let the government live on what's left over?
Yeah. So, for starters, I mean, that's an inherently true argument, Michael, right? So that's kind of the crux of the issue with the statutory PFD. The formula and statute the state hasn't paid in, my gosh, 8 years now, I think. But the reason the state hasn't paid it is because it has a bunch of statutory obligations for government spending, right? And this is where it goes to get the revenue, right? So if you want to fix that, which is what I think everybody wants to talk about, like how do you effectively do what Brian wants to do? Well, the way you do that is you go through and you got to repeal the statutory authority for the state to do a bunch of its obligations, because the state is required to fund these things, and these are the place that you go for the revenue is the only available place right now, which is, unfortunately, the permanent fund earnings,
right.
after the statute 26, which is
right.
the POMV draw.
All
so
right.
In order to,
well, I'm sorry, we're 10 seconds out here from rejoining. So I'm going to give you your head here in the next segment, and we can talk about the future and what you see, and we'll go from there. We'll come back to this at a later date. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio. Here we go.
The Michael Duke Show. Seriously humorous with a pinch of intellect. Sorry. That is humorous. Here's Michael Dukes.
All right, we're continuing now. Will Stapp is our guest, state representative for District 32 up in the interior. Final segment for this hour. Will, I want to give you a little bit of free reign here to talk about, the future, what you see, what you want to have happen. Obviously, we got election season coming up and everything else. So what are your thoughts on the future of Alaska? Because we talked about fiscal plan. You said you don't think the PFD is going to be gone in 3 years. I see with the growth of spending that the potential is definitely there between 3 to 5 years. That will not be a 75-25. In fact, this last year, it would have been a 12% payment to the people. So, I mean, I just think that in the coming years, it will be down to 10% and then 8% and then 5%. And then pretty soon the government will have consumed all of it. But what do you see in the future? What is Will Stapp's vision for the state of Alaska moving forward?
Well, for starters, let me say that your point's incredibly valid, Michael. So if you continue kind of on the same trajectory, you will end up consuming all available revenue for state spending. And that's all you have to do is look at the long-term growth of things and really adding of additional programs. I'm an optimistic person, so I look at the future of Alaska as bright. I think that there are certain things that we need to be doing in order to do that. The most important thing to me is really to have folks who understand that, one, there's a finite amount of money, and two, it is critical that we control the growth of state spend, and we do so in a way that really takes an actual look at the things that the state spends money on determine if there are efficiencies in spending or not. And I think that things, I'll give you a good example. I had another bill, HB 258. It was going to cut a program that 6 people were on, right? And people said, well, how are you going to cut a program? There's 6 people on this. And my argument was, look, I understand that there's 6 people in the state who are on this program, but I just don't believe that 6 people on a statewide program is a statewide program. You know what I mean? So, like, why should the state dump a ton of resources into, general relief, rental, and utility assistance when the return, the people you're actually helping is incredibly marginal? I know that sounds mean, but at some point you got to look at the money. And when you see huge, massive inefficiencies in money, even from a kind of state perspective, like these programs are several $100,000, so they're not that massive in terms of the state's overall spend. But until you start looking at those things and saying, okay, well, we're going to eliminate them because they're inefficient, you're not going to be able to get the spend down. So look at the programs and then start small. And then, there's lots of opportunities, I think, to go through and analyze budget. That's, like I said, when I first got elected, my first goal when I served on finance was to, find out where the money goes, which is difficult. And now you transition to what the money actually does. And when you start looking at what the money actually does, you can make a determination fairly quickly that, hey, some of the stuff that we're spending money on is incredibly wasteful and we shouldn't spend money on it.
Well,
and then you just try to drive the point home.
Yeah, no, and I think that's why the whole vacant positions and your bill, I supported your bill in eliminating, you've got a program that costs hundreds of thousands of dollars to administer for 6 people. That's not a useful, that's a wasteful program in the long run in those kind of things. But like you said, we've got all these statutory programs that were mandated to fill, but the PFD is statutory. Why are we not, again, we're picking and choosing. And yeah, I agree with you. We should be optimistic, but at the same time, we need a healthy dose of realism, being realistic with the optimism, because we can see what the track record of the state is, over the last 15, 20 years, even the last 5 years. You could see the direction that the state is headed. And at that direction, even the governor's 10-year plan shows deficits in the near future, and that assumes again a consumption of pretty much all the available monies, including the PFD. It's hard to ignore. We can be as optimistic as we want, but it's hard to ignore that that's the direction the state's going right now.
Yeah, no, I would say you're correct. So I'll kind of couch my optimism in saying, the reason I'm optimistic is I feel like, I don't know, maybe it's naive, but I feel like if you can articulate to voters, hey, what the problem is, and hey, here's how, here's my plan to look at reducing the size and scope of government. Because if we continue on the pathway that we're on, we're not only going to have no dividend, we may have to impose taxes and not have a dividend. And I don't know. I don't think voters want that. I don't think they want no PFD and an income tax or no PFD and a sales tax. So I think that maybe they will vote for folks who, are open and honest about, what the state's fiscal situation is, and will articulate clearly to them on how they plan to reduce the size and scope of government, or talk about a realistic kind of way to impose a fiscal plan. So that's kind of my hope.
Right. So your plan, your fiscal plan in the future is basically the elimination of programs that shouldn't be there, removing the statutory authority for programs that shouldn't be there, that aren't mandated by the Constitution, and basically doing a review of everything the state's spending money on and reducing those programs. That's your fiscal plan for the future. Am I summating that correctly? I don't want to put words in your mouth.
I would say, I wouldn't say that would be my totality in a plan, right? You certainly would probably have to do more things than just that, because I don't think you can eliminate the size and scope of the state's deficit by just doing that alone. So ultimately, you would have to restructure the dividend formula, or you'd have to impose taxes on somebody, whether that be oil and gas taxes or personal income or personal sales taxes, if you wanted to maintain a statutory payment of a dividend. So you see what I mean? It's like one of these things has to give.
So you'd either have to reduce the size of the dividend, or you'd have to create taxes to keep the dividend at the same amount, is what you're saying.
Yeah, correct. I think that's a reality, right? And that's also, that's so the severity of those things just determines on how much money you spend on government. So my argument is always going to be the first thing you should do as, look at the efficiencies of government. And I think that's what voters want folks to do, right? And then you move to the next step, which is, talking, being open and honest with people about, hey, either changing the dividend formula or saying, okay, well, if we want to incorporate this historic formula, we're going to have to look at, other people paying taxes, And my position has always been, I just don't think it's a wise idea to impose income or sales taxes on a statewide level. And I think it'd be a more efficient thing to change the dividend structure to pay it. And I don't have any problem saying that. I realize that it's not super popular, but my goal is always to reduce the size and scope of government first, because that should always be the first step.
Right. Well, I mean, we're paying a tax already. That's the thing, Will. The taking of the PFD is a de facto tax anyway. Everyone's already paying for the size and scope of government. And again, my fear overall is that the dividend is going to be finally consumed, and then they're going to turn around and stick their hand out again and say, now we need to pay our fair share. That's the direction I think we're going. We're down to the last 2 minutes here, Will, so I want to give you the floor and give you final thoughts for today. Anything you want to cover?
Yeah, well, I will say that, your analysis, certainly I would say the worst case scenario, right? I would think the worst case scenario would be continuing to spend on government, growth exponentially, eliminating the PFD program, and then taxing everybody on a level. That would be a very, I think, bad. I think that'd be a very disastrous thing for Alaskan residents. I think it'd be incredibly harmful on economic growth and outcome. But I will say that it doesn't have to end that way, I guess, Michael. So I will always kind of fall back on the positive note, right? I think there's a lot of talented people that I got to have the ability, especially in the House majority Republicans, to work with. I find myself, very privileged that I was able to, meet those folks and work with them on things. And I think a lot of folks have a lot of great ideas. And I think that we have to understand that it took a long time for the state to kind of dig itself into this position, and it's going to take some time to get us out of it, right? So what we have to do, I think, is remain positive, clearly articulate the problems, identify what the solution should be, and then kind of start working toward them, And I think that Alaska as a whole is well positioned to be able to have a bright future. And, I think that sometimes, as a state, we've been our own worst enemy historically. Right. And I think if we change that around, we have great opportunity here. So.
Will Stapp, State Representative District 32, thank you for joining us this morning to talk a little bit about the future and the past, and we appreciate it. Thank you for coming on board. Hold the line for just a second. Folks, we're out of time for Hour 1. Hour 2 is dead ahead. What's the election look like? We'll tell you more in just a minute. I mean, again, Will, I admire optimism, no problem, but there's that old adage that past performance is indicative of future results. And as much as we want and wish and can, we're going to try and vote harder to put in people who want a smaller, more limited government, the historical facts show that that's not necessarily what we end up with. And I mean, again, I'm not just making stuff up and thinking that this is like, again, the 10-year plans are all showing this deficit spending, and nobody in the legislature is really talking about it. The past 4 or 5 10-year outlooks that have come out have all said, hey, in the future, based on the current projections, this is where we're going. And we're already being taxed. And so having a new tax on top of that down the line shouldn't, people should not be surprised if that comes about. I want to be optimistic. The problem is that I'm seeing the track record, and the track record says otherwise.
Yeah, so I will say the first thing to tell you about investment is that past performance is not indicative of future results, but I will say it is a wise thing to look at the.
But we're not talking about investing. We're talking about track records of human beings doing the same thing, because people dislike change.
Yeah, well, that was that was the next point that I was going to make. Unfortunately, people are not the same as investment returns, right? But I will just say, Michael, that if I wasn't an optimistic person, I wouldn't do this job. right? I wouldn't have ran for office. I have, I wouldn't say not so much the faith in people. I just know, being down there and working on it, that there are good people who want to make structural change in government, and I think that ultimately time and pressure will build, and financial things will change in state government, which will have to kind of make that decisions. And my hope is just to start chipping away at it slowly and surely, right? I filed for re-election. The main reason I did that is because we didn't pass the bill to cut a program no one was on. So my goal is to go back there and cut the program that nobody was on, and I would consider that a huge win.
Right.
And I don't think that's an unreasonable ask.
I think
it's not an unreasonable ask.
Yeah, no, I think a huge win would be if we just follow the statutory programs that we have in place already. And that if we're not going to follow it, we at least remove the statute. I mean, one or the other. And that's every statute, not just the PFD one, but the session length, the signing out at midnight, all these things. I would just love to see us follow the law, Will.
Yeah, no, and I'm glad you brought up the point. It's not limited to the dividend statute. It is across the board. I think that, you're absolutely right. Like, we should absolutely go through and clean up our statutes, and we should ensure that things that we're doing, we have the power to change our laws, and we should have the, fortitude to do that, right? And it is a team process, and I think that we're going to get there. And, it's frustrating. And, I'm not going to lie and say that I'm not frustrated when you go down through and that.
Right.
But, it's widespread, right? I mean, I could name probably 8 or 9 different statutes that we have, we tell ourselves that we should be doing, and we don't do. A lot of them, those are kind of budgetary funding things. And you could argue, well, the court said this and the court said that, but that doesn't make it inherently right. Right. And,
well, if we ignore the law, we threaten to create an Irish democracy. If we continue to just ignore the law, then people are like, well, then the law doesn't matter. And we should be better examples than that.
Yeah, and like I said, I don't have any problem changing the statute, and I don't have any problem looking at school bond and debt reimbursement and changing that, or major maintenance fund, or all the other things, right? And those things we should do and we should talk about. But I will say, at the end of the day, you're dealing with 40 people in the House and 20 people in the Senate, and you have a governor, and our system is designed to have slow change. But again, I always fall back on my optimism and say, hey, it's a huge priority, and I think we'll get there. And the reason I do, I guess, because the alternative is not good.
Yeah.
Right? And I just kind of refuse to think that we're going to go down that pathway.
Well,
and I know that I'm going to continue to do all I can to make sure we don't.
I admire your optimism in that, but I also, again, you got to have a healthy dose of skeptical realism to understand that this is the direction we're going. And we've got to, we either got to admit that that's the direction we're going to be able to pull it back or not. Final thoughts, Will, 60 seconds here.
Yeah, no, just appreciate the time and to come on the show and talk to folks, I agree with you. I'm glad you were on the radio, and I think skepticism is a good thing. And I think, telling voters the message about, hey, unless things change, structurally, we might be in a world of hurt here in a few years. I think that when you look at the state's revenue picture, and really FY27 and FY28, that's kind of the critical mass years. And, my hope is to put the work in to avoid that and to kind of move Alaska forward in a positive direction. But I always appreciate the time.
Thank you, Will. Appreciate you calling in. Appreciate you being part of the program today.
Yep. Thanks, Michael.
All right. Will Stapp, our guest here on the program, The Michael Duke Show. Look, this is a challenge. But I think if we continue to ignore what the outcomes or what the outlooks say, and we continue to just say blithely that it's going to be okay, that we can, we've got to, speaking of crisis, we've got to push the idea that this is a crisis, because it is. If we continue to say, well, I think it'll be fine, we'll always get what we've always got. We've got to highlight the urgency of this situation, and it's a tough thing to do. All right, we're going to continue here. Hour 2 dead ahead. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Let's jump back into it. Hour 2 is right now.
Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That's just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Live around the world on the interwebs at MichaelDukesShow.com and across the state of Alaska on this your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Good morning and welcome to the program. Hour 2 of the big radio show. Just finished up with Representative Will Stapp from the Interior, District 32 up there, talking with him about the future of the state, where things are going and everything else. And something occurred to me. In our discussion with Will, I was talking specifically about the direction that the state is heading, that the track record of this legislature and previous legislatures over the last dozen years or so has been on a continual, who am I kidding? The last 25 years has been on a continual spend projection. And that it's, that based on that performance in the past, that it will only be, 3 years, maybe 5 years, and the dividend will be all but consumed by state spending. And he talked about his optimism for the future. And I admire that. I admire people who are optimistic. I think you have to have a good nugget of optimism in a lot of the things that you do. But it made me think that the difference between he and I is it's not the opposites of optimism versus pessimism. I don't think acknowledging that the track record of the legislature and that the direction that the state is going is a bad direction. I don't see that as pessimism. I think you have optimism on one side, you have pessimism on the other side. In the middle, you have kind of the realism of realizing that there's some from both sides of the argument. And I like to think and style myself as thinking that I'm a realist. I'm in the middle there, realizing I have optimism that I think the state can come back from the direction that it's going. I think it is possible. And I am hopeful that the state can come back from the absolute, I was going to say tax and spend. And it is a bit with the PFD taking. It is a tax and spend, but really it's mostly a spend and spend problem right now and has been for 25 years. But in the future, it will truly be a tax and spend problem because they will consume all of the available monies and then come to you with their hand out looking for more. I think that's the track record. It's not pessimism if you're pointing out a problem. If you're pointing out the direction that something is headed and saying it would be pessimism if I said we're doomed, we're never going to fix it, these people are never going to change, there's always going to be people who want their hand out, who want government to take care of things. I think that there are some people that are like that, but I don't think as a whole, the state is. I think people are more apathetic than anything else. It's the apathy of the voter and the opportunism of some legislators that have created the problem that we have today. But I say that, again, it's not optimism versus pessimism. It's optimism versus realism, being realistic and saying this is the direction we are heading. Again, going back to my favorite analogy. You've heard me use it a million times. The train. We're on the train. We're on the tracks. We could see that the bridge is out ahead of us as we round the curve, and we could see well ahead of us that the trestles are gone, the bridge has fallen, and we can, that it's coming up. It's not being pessimistic to say, we can't make that gap. It's not pessimistic to say, hey, the bridge is out. You could be optimistic to say, well, if we put enough coal in her, we can jump the gap. Right? We're just trying to be realistic that maybe we should slow down a little bit. Maybe we should slow down and stop the train before we hit the bridge. Pessimism would be, if we slow down, we'll just wreck the train anyway. And that's kind of where I think we're at. And he acknowledged that my points were valid, but at the same time, they're valid, and then you can't ignore them. You can't just say, well, those are valid, but, well, wait a second. This is not me talking. This is not me saying, well, I just believe, I'm the only one that believes that on the current spending trajectory, we will be out of money. We will be out of money in so many years. That's just truth. It's not just me saying it. The 10-year projections have said it. Everybody going back. I mean, I like Donna Ardwin. I love her. She's in the chat room right now. But I mean, she pointed this out in 2018 with the budget that they put together. It was an attempt to try and slow the train down, but it created such a fervor amongst the whole pro-government crowd. It's like they are willfully blind. They do not see the direction that this is going. Even Will said, in the future, we're either going to have to change the PFD statute, and that's when you say change the PFD statute, what he means is create a smaller PFD, or we're going to have to tax. That's an acknowledgement that I am right. Now, whether that means that the PFD goes away completely, or they have to create a tax to offset those costs, this all comes back to a spending problem. And we have an electorate that has become, we have created in this state a dependency state where everybody is dependent on government for something, it seems like. Now, obviously not everybody who's listening, but there are tons of people in the state who have become dependent and grown comfortable with the dependency on that of the state to be able to do it. And so, of course, they want to send back their same people over and over and over again to keep the gravy train rolling. That is human nature. This, again, is the whole warning of woe be unto the republic when the public figures out that they can vote themselves largesse from the treasury. This is where we're at. We've got 1/3 of the state of Alaska is on welfare, medical welfare, Medicaid, 270,000 something people. And that doesn't count the housing, the housing payments, or it doesn't count the heating and utility payments, and it doesn't count the every other kind of payment that the state is creating out there. 1/3 alone is on medical. 1/3 of the state is dependent on government for their medical costs and everything else. It's problematic. And I'm just highlighting from that interview with Will that, he keep talking about, he just wanted to be optimistic. I mean, he acknowledges that my points were valid, but your unbridled optimism is not going to be enough. You have to acknowledge the problem and then move forward from it. And yes, you have to tell people what they don't want to hear, like the PFD is going to go away. That's a truism. Based on current spend and projections and increases, it will be gone. It's not an if, it's a when. I say probably 3 years, maybe 5 years on the outside, but maybe it's 10 years. Maybe maybe in year 9 from now, we get a $200 dividend and we should be so happy that we're getting our $200 dividend. They couldn't afford the supersized $1,000 dividend anymore, even though statutorily we probably should be receiving a $5,000 dividend. But you see what I'm saying? But it will be gone. If Juneau fell into the ocean tomorrow and they couldn't meet for 5 years while they're rebuilding the Capitol somewhere, and the budget just was on autopilot for the next 5 years, the budget would go up $750 million just in the baked-in automatic escalators that are in the budget right now. $750 million in 5 years. Where is that money going to come from? Because the legislature doesn't care about the private economy, the producing side of the private economy. They've divorced themselves from that. They care about what's coming out of the permanent fund itself through the POMV draw. They want to make sure that that's okay. But at that cost, they've eliminated any kind of connectivity to the private economy. So how are they going to make up that $750 million in revenue? Oh, new oil development. Higher taxes for oil companies. Carbon sequestration. We're going to sell our carbon sequestration. Okay. I mean, are these all guaranteed? No, none of these are guaranteed. The only thing we can control today that will affect us tomorrow is what we're spending today. And that's the problem. Nobody wants to acknowledge the truth that the direction that we're heading is taking us off the bridge. I mean, I appreciate Will coming on, and he acknowledges that I had valid points, but then goes on to say, well, but here's how we can fix it, et cetera. Not acknowledging, trying to, in a way, minimizing the truth of my statement. I have optimism. I hope that we can change it. But the bottom line is that if we don't acknowledge how critical it is to change these things, if we don't acknowledge that the crisis exists, we're never going to fix it until you cannot pull the handbrake 10 yards from the bridge. Right? You can't throw the brakes on then. It's too late. The time to start applying the pressure is now. But very few people in the legislature want to acknowledge that this is the reality. The reality is we're going to continue to spend at the current rate if we keep sending the same people back, we keep doing the same things that we've been doing. We're going to spend at the same rate, and if we continue to spend at this same rate or more, it will have consumed all available money within the next, I think, 3 years, 3.5 years. Donna is in the chat room. Donna could tell me. 3 years, right, Donna? I think it's 2028, 2027, 2028, right? Those are the make or break years. I mean, at that point, you will have consumed everything. And then you can hear it already. Well, free rides die hard. You Alaskans, you've had it so easy for so many years. You haven't had any taxes, and now you need to pay your fair share. Oh, you mean the dividend? Oh, that was just our money anyway. That was government money to begin with. We were just being nice to you at that point. This is what Hammond warned about. This is what Jay Hammond was really concerned about. You go back and you read his writings in Diapering the Devil and other things, and you could see this was what he was concerned about. Politicians getting an access to an apparently unlimited supply of money and just spending themselves right into a corner. That's where we're at. So it's the definition, it's the difference between pessimism and optimism, with realism in the middle, saying, I want to be optimistic, but I could still see the truth, even as ugly as the truth is. And I think we can change it. That's my optimistic side again. But we've got to acknowledge that there is a problem, and we have to highlight them. That's not being pessimistic or negative. It's being truthful. The bridge is out. I don't want to die. That's not being pessimistic, right? Pull the brake, please, conductor. Pull the brake. Oh, we'll make it. Hold my beer. It'll be fantastic. That jump, I could do that in my sleep. All right. Sorry, I just had to let that out. It was hurting me. It was hurting me. Coming up, a lot of stuff happened in the last 24 hours in the election arena. This upcoming election season is going to be interesting. We're going to talk about that. And we'll see who it is. We'll go from there. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio.
Listened to by more staffers in Juneau than any other show, because their bosses told them to. And after what they just heard, oh man, they're going to be pissed.
You're a bad, bad man.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay. The conductor is... Who is the conductor? I've seen somebody said that the conductor's here, but who are we talking about? It's my own show, and I don't know who the conductor is. Tell me who it is. All right. Cindy says, Michael, this is exactly why I love you. She loves it when I lose my mind. When I lose my temper, Cindy's happy. It's not good. It's not good for my blood pressure. Not good for my blood pressure. Again, taxing is not the real issue. Uncontrolled spending is the real. It's so much truth in that statement. It hurts right there. You know, that is the absolutely. Abso-freaking-lutely. Fat Ray over on YouTube said, you did good just letting Will talk. Sometimes people need to be allowed to talk to see how they actually think. I mean, I just wanted to, he can dig his own holes at some point. I just want to throw those things out there. But again, it's this dichotomy of people believing something that is Who said it? Was it you, Fat Ray, that said it? Somebody else said it was diametrically opposed. Like he said the one thing, but at the same time, he acknowledges, I'm looking backward here because it was a good comment and I meant to talk about it. I'm scrolling backwards here because it was a good comment because it kind of showed the dichotomy of his thinking, right? Like you can espouse one thing and you can hold these two separate, basically competing beliefs at the same time. Where is it? I should have marked it for later and I didn't. I'm going back there to see it. All right. I can't find it. Too many comments. And then I just saw a comment from Brian that I should address that somebody said, Brian said something about comments being hidden. Where is that? Here it is. Question for you. It's been noted that a number of comments in the chat in recent days have been hidden. Any idea why? No, I don't hide. The only time I hide comments is if they are blatant spam, because from the screen that I'm on, I can't always block but I can either delete or hide things. I have hidden a few comments that were, I don't want to say racist, that were, attacks, personal attacks. That's the word I was looking for. That's the phrase I was looking for. Personal attacks on somebody. There have been a few comments, mostly from our resident troll, that I have hidden after they pop up, because nobody needs to be belittled because of their occupation, etc. But I don't hide anything. So that's a function of the AI of Facebook. If comments are being hidden, I have no idea why. I've actually gone back to look at certain shows to look at a comment or something that I missed or that I wanted to review, and found that there have been some comments that have been hidden. I'm not doing any of that. I have no idea. Ain't nobody got time to go back through every show and hide comments. That's, anyway. Donna says Alaskans need a governor with a strong fiscally conservative conviction and a strong spine. Paging Mike Shower. Courtesy phone for Mike Shower. I'm going through here. Thankful Donna has not given up on us. Me too, I'm sure. 1/3 of Alaskans are on medical. How many Alaskans depend on governments for their job? Back when I was on the assembly, we did the math at one point. It was something like 51% of the state of Alaskans were employed by government. Federal, state, borough, city. All right. I'm just, dude just came for an hour to give us platitudes. I mean, just, again, some people think differently. He got a chance to basically tell us everything he thought. All right, we got to go. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio. Let's do it.
Public enema number one. Oh, wait, sorry. Public enemy number one, which makes more sense. On the other hand, he's a little bit of a pain in the Michael Duke Show.
Welcome back. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. I'm just answering comments and questions in the chat room right now. We are ready to continue on here, discussions about what's coming up with the elections. It's been busy. It's been a busy 24 hours. The article from the ADN from just a couple days ago was basically saying, wow, many of these lawmakers are unopposed, and they mentioned a few people who wouldn't be going back, but then all of a sudden it was like, bazoom, a whole slew of stories about people who have decided to not run, and we'll see where it goes from there. And of course, the changes that have come about for that. It's going to be an interesting election season. I would love to see on Saturday. I would just love to see I would love to see Monday's show being nothing but a review of all the new candidates that filed for office on Saturday. Saturday is the final deadline. So let me go through just a few of the candidates who have now filed and are making themselves known. My friend Ron Gillum down in Soldotna has now filed for a rematch with Justin Ruffridge, who, by the way, let me go back and look, because I asked Justin to be on the program this week and he has never responded to my text. I'm just going to look to see how many times I asked him for an interview. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 times I asked him to interview and no response. Actually, 1 response saying he couldn't do it. The other 3, no response. So I know that if I called Ron and said, hey, Ron, I'd love to talk to you this week, that he'd probably make time to come on board and talk with us about things. So that's a plus in that category. Ron lost that race by a little bit. Part of this had to do, of course, with the ranked choice voting and everything else. But Ron Gillum now back in the race. And, of course, Ruffridge running from the left of Gillum as a Republican, but as more of a centrist Republican than the conservative Ron Gillum. So it's good to see Ron get in the race. Interesting story. Ron actually initially had told me that he had jumped in to become a legislator because of this program, because I basically said at one point, if not you, then who? And if not now, then when? And Ron answered the call. So Ron, congratulations. I hope that the folks in the Kenai-Soldotna area get behind you. House District 7, Ron Gillum, now running for House District 7. We reported on this yesterday, just mentioned it in passing, but Dan Ortiz, who is the independent, he's a Democrat. He was a non-affiliated member, but he always caucused with the Democrats. He has decided that he will not run for his seat. He said he's got some kind of chronic health condition, didn't explain why, and said he'd like to spend more time with he's 65 years old. I mean, I'll be honest with you, if I was rich and free and clear and doing everything else and I had any other option, I wouldn't want to, even if at 65, I don't want to deal with a bunch of yahoos, right? But there he goes. He is he's done for now. He's calling it quits. Jeremy Bynum, who is the Republican candidate for House District 1, which is a Republican district. I mean, it's a pretty red district overall, was already running. And he, in fact, had already had the endorsement of the District 1 Republicans prior to Ortiz announcing his departure. That also means that there is another, there's another story here. I'm looking for the story. Where is it? Right here. There we go. There's another candidate in Ketchikan, Grant Echo Hawk, a member of the Ketchikan Borough Assembly. He had planned to run for Alaska House this year before deciding not to. But now, with the departure of Ortiz, he said he would now likely run for the seat, but still would need to file the paperwork with the Division of Elections. If there's no more ringing endorsement or reason to be happy for this change, other than the fact that Calvin Schrage is quoted in the paper as says House Minority Leader Calvin Schrage, an Anchorage independent who served with Ortiz in the bipartisan coalition since 2021, said that Ortiz leaving the legislature would be a huge loss. If that tells you that you should, nothing more than you should be doing a happy dance, Calvin Schrage's upset about it. I'm all about that. That's so. Ortiz is leaving. Thank you for your service, Craig, or for Dan, and appreciate all you do. May not agree with you, but anybody who gives service, it's a hats off to you kind of thing. And I hope you enjoy the time with your family, the downtime with your family, because that's what he's going to be doing. In other news, up in the interior, Senate District R, Click Bishop has decided that he is not going to be running for re-election. He said he's going to take a pause. He says he's going to take a couple years off. What? A couple years? Wait, let me do the math on that. Let me do the math. He said he's going to focus on his family and gold mining over the next 2 years while hinting at a future run for another elected office. Governor, anyone? Click Bishop going to be running for governor? I mean, there's so many rumors floating around on who is going to want to try and take the governorship after Dunleavy leaves. We've heard Peter Micciche has been considering it. We know Natasha von Imhoff has considered it. Oh my God, that would be so amazing. And now Click Bishop, those three running against each other. Oh, man. Anyway, Click Bishop has decided that he's had enough for now. He said he's going to go out and do some gold mining and focus on family and do some other things and hang out a little bit. But the hint is that he's going to jump back in in another 2 years, and probably probably want to run for, I would say, governor is probably the position that he's looking. He goes, my family and I are not done with public service. There's still a determination inside of me to fix our current path of rising energy costs and the loss of our working age population. It's clear that addressing those issues requires taking on a bigger role than serving in the legislature. The only role bigger than serving in the legislature is governor. So, I mean, he's basically telegraphing the move. This is what's going on. Now, in other news, immediately after that, Mike Kronk filed for that seat. So Mike Kronk, who is currently serving for District 36, which is the same district, encompasses most of the same district, is now filed for Click Bishop's seat, and we'll see what we'll see what he can do. I was wondering if he was going to make that move, or maybe if Elijah Verhagen was going to come back and try again. But now that Kronk has moved in there, that won't make a whole lot of sense. It'll be interesting to see who steps up steps up into the House seat 36. Who's going to run for that? Now, who's going to pick up the slack there? But Kronk is going to be moving over to the Senate and running for that seat. We'll see if anybody else throws their hat in the ring on it. Right now, no. I mean, you're going to have a certain kind of person in that seat, because you've got to kowtow to certain more progressive policies. I mean, Click Bishop was a big union guy, big union supporter, even though he had the R next to his name. Much of the stuff that he did was, well, very progressive in that regard as well. Also up in the interior, lots of changes in the interior, Bart LeBon is now setting a rematch up for the race with Maxine Dibbert. Now, interestingly enough, again, kind of the ranked choice thing, did us in on this. When Bart ran last time against Maxine, Kelly Nash was also in the race. Maxine ended up walking away with a 40% of the vote, something like that. But in the long run, LeBon had a 29%. And Maxine, 29%. Kelly Nash had 21. Maxine had 49. So the two Republicans took 51% of the vote, and Dibbert defeated LeBon with a 49%. So if no other mainstream Republican gets in the race, I suppose, or maybe we should, there should be some primaries where people acknowledge that if I don't win the primary, then I'll get back out, like Nick Begich just done on the congressional race. Maybe that's what could happen. We got to stop shooting ourselves in the foot. See, the Democrats, they only run one person. They only run one valid candidate. That's the beauty for them of ranked choice voting, is that they are very unified. They're very kumbaya. If the party decides they want to run a seat, there may be some fringe candidates in there, some Green Party people, or just some no names that may take a point or two, but they will only support one major candidate. Whereas Republicans, as in the race for Mary Peltola, where they put in, two big names kind of thing, they will always seemingly run a couple people against each other and then lose the vote because of it. That's the danger of ranked choice, because Republicans are too stupid to figure out not to put a bunch of people in the same race in something like that. Maybe that was a little harsh of me to say they're too stupid, but come on, people. If the Democrats can figure it out not to run more than one major candidate in a race, why do you continue to do this? Well, because I could be better. Okay. All right. Well, anyway, Bart LeBon is going to be running again. No other word as to anybody else that may be running in the race, but we'll see. We'll see. Again, if LeBon had taken all of Nash's votes, or if Nash had taken all of LeBon's votes, one way or the other, Dibbert would not be in the legislature right now. So this is going to be an interesting race up in the interior. Lots of interesting things happening up there right now. But I got to take a break. We got one more. I still got more to talk about. There's still more changes. It's kind of crazy, including the return of the cop. I'll be back. The Michael Dukes Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio.
Running on 100% pure beard power. Oh, also some coffee. We dip our beard in coffee.
Ha, nice beard.
The Michael Dukes Show.
Okay. All right. You should hear Judy Elge talk about how stupid Republicans are. I mean, they're just so stupid. Why would you run four people in you get a four-way race, you get one Democrat and three Republicans, and the Republicans spend the whole time beating the crap out of each other, and then you're surprised that the Democrat wins. I mean, so stupid. Circle the wagons and shoot inward. That's what we do. Circle the wagons and shoot inward. All right, where we go? Wow. Lucid, tell me how you feel. Okay, so good deal. Congratulations to Ron. Let's see. Ron said, when I said that Ron ran for office because he heard me talking on the program one day, that I basically challenged him. He felt like I challenged him personally. And he said, yep. And now my wife hates you. Sorry. I'm so sorry. All right. Click's going to run for governor. Yeah. I mean, it's patently obvious that he's running for governor. Now, what does that mean? Because he and Natasha apparently are really good friends. So what does that mean for Natasha's run? What does it mean for Machicki's run? I mean, there's the rumors mill has been going 1,000,000 miles a minute on Machicki wanting to run. What does it mean? I mean, I have no idea. Let's see. The three Bill just said the Three Stooges run for governor. Okay. James Squires and Pam Good have put out their names in for the House. Is that for Kronk's district? Husband and wife running against each other? I don't know. Okay. Wow. Michael, the Republicans are not stupid. The system is working as intended. Oof. And Joel said, as a Republican, I take no offense. Well, because it is stupid. The whole thing is stupid. God. Let's see. Maybe Dave Tallarico will come back after Kronk. I don't know. Republicans love to shoot each other in the foot whenever they can. I mean, like I said, it is the classic tactic of Republicans in this state. You guys, you literally talk a big talk, pound their chest, everything else, circle up the wagons, and then turn inwards and shoot the hell out of each other. It's just, I mean, wow. Okay. I think I've caught up on all the comments for now, other than Well, apparently somebody doesn't watch this program very much because they seem to think the comments seem to think that I'm a Donald Trump fan or supporter or something. Somebody on YouTube is like all about Trump and Nazi and megalomania and everything else, and I'm like, yeah, I agree. I mean, he's crazy, but hey, whatever. Fat race is not just the state, the whole country. Yeah, but look, the two-party system is so fundamentally flawed. I mean, it's why I've never been a member of any party. It's why I'm a libertarian. You guys can all hate me equally because I'm a libertarian. That's exactly right there. That's it. Oh, you guys. When was the last time there was a libertarian elected to the state legislature? I don't know if there's ever, Dick Randolph. I think, wasn't he? Yeah. Anyway, I think that Dick Randolph was probably the last libertarian elected in the state. I mean, well, I was a libertarian and I was elected in the state, but in state government, I think Dick Randolph was the last one. It would be, oh God, leave us alone. Who's the rabble rouser on YouTube? Lucid Dream? I'd like to lucid dream. Lucid Dream. The Libertarians showed their quality at the convention with their nomination. This is also why I'm not a member of the Libertarian Party, because you got the guy with the boot on his head and the people taking freaking edible gummies before they make a speech about being president. And I mean, come on, folks. Can we be serious for a minute here? Please. Can we be serious? Here we go. Common Sense Radio. Okay. Hello. You guys ready? Final segment for today's show. Damn, this is the fastest 2 hours in radio, isn't it? It just goes by in a blink. But here we are. Here we are talking about all the various races that are going on out there. Couple of the races that you may not remember or think about. You got Leslie Hajdukovic, who's now running against Scott Kawasaki in Fairbanks for that Senate race. David Eastman's got a challenger, a Republican challenger. I've forgotten her name. I know that Jesse Sumner had said that he had not decided yet whether or not he was going to run. He was making noises about that. Let's see. What was the comment? Jesse Sumner, wrong one, said Thursday he was still undecided on whether he would run again after winning the open seat in 2022 in a four-way Republican race. He said he's weighing several factors, including his family, his business, and would likely decide whether to run close to the June 1st deadline. So that's like Saturday. I don't know if Jesse Sumner is going to run again. There was a lot of contention with Jesse at the very end and I don't know the whole backstory, but I know that part of the reason why they ran over the midnight hour had something to do with something that Jesse had going on. He was upset about something. I don't know. Maybe it was enough for him to just, to throw his hat in the ring or throw his hat in the air. I don't know. Tom McKay is going to face Democrat Denny Wells in 2022. McKay beat him by 7 votes. It's going to be interesting to see where he ends up as well. Of course, Ben Carpenter is moving from the House. He's going to be running for the Senate seat currently held by Jesse Bjorkman. Carpenter, I think, is pretty well loved on the peninsula. My feel and my take, and I don't live on the peninsula, so you guys will have to correct me if I'm wrong, is that I think he's got a pretty good shot because Jesse has got some detractors. And Carpenter is well known and I think well respected by both sides of the aisle. So I think that'll be a very interesting matchup. Filling the void behind Carpenter, John Hillier and Ben Elam are both running for that seat. Elam is a member of the Borough Assembly on the KPB, and Hillier is a retired Air Force general and a pilot. So that should be an interesting matchup as well. Julie Colomb is going to face non-partisan candidate Walter Featherly. Now, Featherly has run for office several times. I've interviewed him on the program a couple times. He's an interesting cat. He is not a standard traditional Republican or Democrat. I mean, maybe libertarian-ish, maybe. Interesting guy. I just know that I'm so unhappy with Julie about the whole childcare issue that, I mean, I love what she did with the numbers. I loved, in the early parts of the session, we would talk with her and she seemed to be saying all the right things. And then they spent $7 million on childcare, which again, to me, should be a free market issue and just get the government out of it, eliminate the government regulation. That was the part of the problem. That was the part they didn't want to do. Instead, they're going to throw money at it. And I know Julie is upset with me because I've said some things about this before, but I just disagree with her that it should not be the government's position to do it. Now, the question is, will the electorate feel the same way? Or will her electorate applaud her for spending the $7 million? Well, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens. David Nelson's going to get back in the race. David Nelson, you remember him. He's the one that defeated Gabrielle Ledoux. And he is back in the race running against Cliff Groh. Groh beat him in 2022. He got 56% of the vote. And so the question is, with the redistricting and everything, how is Nelson going to fare? I don't know. I just don't know. Neil Foster is going to face off against Tyler Ivanoff, a member of the Alaska Independence Party from Shishmaref. Foster beat Ivanoff last time by 92 votes. So it can make a difference. It depends on who you get out there, and can you get certain groups, and are people happy with Neil Foster's votes on the PFD and everything else? Foster's been in there for a long time. So it'll be interesting to see what's going on. And then James Kaufman is facing off against Democrat Janice Park as well. So we'll see what's going on. The race that I'm going to be watching very closely is the race in Homer with our friend Sarah Vance, who I love to pieces. I think she's doing a great job. But there are multiple challengers, including, as noted by the ADN, nonpartisan candidate Brett Johnson, who currently serves on the KPB Assembly. There's a lot of KPB Assembly members running for statewide office these days. I mean, it's that the third one, I think, that's running right now. Anyway, he announced his legislative bid earlier this month, and he cited as his reason for jumping in the race her decision not to override the governor's veto on the education bill. Johnson said in an interview a couple weeks ago that he first considered running the legislature more than a decade ago, but he was enjoying working with the Borough Assembly. Apparently, he's been on the Borough Assembly for a long time and living in his Clam Gulch home. But now, he said, we got to do it. Vance is a conservative member of the current Republican-dominated majority and a key backer of Dunleavy's policies. Johnson said that if elected, he would look to join a bipartisan caucus and to rebuke some of Dunleavy's policies. Rebuke the governor. Well, he'd be in good hands with some of the members that are down there. Although, I don't know. I think Sarah's been pretty popular. She's had some strong competitors in the past. So it should be interesting. I'd love to talk to Sarah about this as we move forward. Thomas Baker in Kotzebue became one of several Republicans who initially voted in favor of the education legislation, but later voted to sustain the governor's veto. And that led to Robin Burke of Ukhtavik. She's a Democrat. She's decided to run against Baker because of that education vote could come back to haunt some of the folks up there as well. So those are a few of the things. Oh, the one piece of good news, Jenny Armstrong's not coming back. She did one and done. Remember her? She was the one that her residency was challenged and she had that whole court case, and then she was trying to raise $150,000 to pay for the legal bills and everything. So Jenny Armstrong is not running again. But Democrat Carolyn Hall is already filed for the seat. And we'll see what happens. Oh, and Laddie Shaw, he retired, 75 years old. Hoorah! He's doing his thing. Multiple candidates have indicated they would run for the seat, including Girdwood Republican Lee Ellis, who's a craft brewery president, and Kai Holland, a nonpartisan candidate and entrepreneur. There's a whole article on this from Ira Samuels over at the ADN. You can check out all that stuff as well. But returning. Oh, he's like a bad penny. He just keeps turning up. Chuck Kopp, Republican in name only, if I've ever seen one. He was beat by party chairman Tom McKay in 2020, but the district lines have shifted, and now he's going to take on Craig Johnson. This is one of Kathy Giesel's chief wingmen. It was Chuck Kopp and Jennifer Johnston. Those were her two wingmen in the House when Giesel was there before. But he is her wingman. He, in fact, had been known to have threatened Representative Johnson this year, Craig Johnson, saying that if he didn't vote for Senator Giesel's defined benefits bill for state employees, he would run against him. Now, Kopp is a former police officer, and he's big in the unions, and so, of course, he wants all that defined benefit stuff there. That's a big, and of course, he was a proponent of SB 91. He didn't want to change it. He's very much a tough on. He's an interesting cat, and I could have gone another decade without him running again. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how Craig Johnson does with this, again, because of the education vote, and that district is kind of purple. So Kopp could have some support from the Democratic side, especially if he goes in there talking about defined benefits and everything else. So, I mean, this is all just stuff that's kind of broken out. A lot of this has just come out in the last 24 hours. And so, expect more tomorrow and Saturday. Monday is going to be a busy show. We will have a full rundown of everybody who's going to be running. It should be interesting, to say the least. All right, tomorrow's Firearms Friday. Dr. John Lott will be joining us in hour 1. Willie Waffle in hour 2, maybe another guest in between there somewhere. If not, it'll just be you and me for Firearms Friday. Enjoy the day, my friends. Be kind, love one another, live well. We'll see you tomorrow. Oh, who's running against Stutz? Nobody. I mean, it's nobody. Jill says, I'm actually sad for the Libertarians with their nominee talking about shooting inward. Sorry, Dukes, just being on. Again, I'm not a member of the Libertarian. I'm a Libertarian with a small L, not a large L. So, I mean, the Libertarian politics don't really affect me because I'm not a member of the party. They're crazy. I mean, half those, it's hard to see sometimes. Donna says that Julie did try and cut the budget. Well, yes, but at the same time, she's got no problem spending on some of the things that I think I'm frustrated with her. I think she's a good egg, and she had a lot of good ideas about cutting the budget and digging into that, and I loved what she had to say, but I just so vehemently disagree with this childcare thing. I just don't even know what to say at this point. Jill says, I love Sarah Vance. Can we clone her? Oh, yeah. There you go. All right. What else is it? COP will be funding. Will get funding from the same place as Justin Ruffridge and Jesse Bjorkman, the NEA. Yeah, no, it's exactly it. I mean, I agree. I think that they're going to be union guys, and that's what's going to be going on. The only person running against James Kaufman is Janice Park, Park. Anyway, she's the Democrat. So it'll be interesting to see. I mean, let's fingers crossed that we get some more good candidates in the next couple of days. That's all we can hope for right now. All right, my friends. Well, I got to go. I got a whole day's worth of work ahead of me. I will see you tomorrow for Firearms Friday. Thanks for coming in and being part of it with me today, spending some time with me. I appreciate that. I always love my mornings with you. Don't forget to share, to like, to do all that stuff. If you want to help support the show, you can go over to Patreon and become a member of the Common Sense Corps. All right, gotta go. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense, Liberty-Based, Free Thinking Radio.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.